to produce coffee is way more difficult than producing wine or beer. There's so many more factors that go into it. So the farmers, the landowners care for their plants. Plants maybe live for 50 years, maybe 100 years, but they're growing, producing fruit all that time. The soil's got to be cared for, the environment around them, all that kind of thing. And then on top of that, once the coffee's flower and then fruit, if they have the right amount of shade and rainfall and sunlight that year, then they'll produce a cherry. The cherries ripen over a period of like a month, so you can't just go and like pick them all like bananas or spray them like avocados and pick them all on the same day type thing. You basically have to have like an expert picker human being that goes in and like selects the red cherries when they're super ripe, and then they deliver them to a mill manager, and they'll be paid like based on how many cherries they picked that day. It takes about 6 kilos of cherries to produce a kilo of coffee, so you can imagine the volume of cherries is actually a huge amount compared to just the green coffee we're getting and then the roasted coffee after that. So it goes farmer, picker, then a mill manager, so somewhere where they're processing, maybe centralized, maybe on the farm, they're processing that coffee. That means they're going to check whether it's ripe or not. So the mill manager will be giving payment based on how ripe the coffee is and how good it looks from the picker off their farm, and then they'll pay them, they'll get the cherries, and then the fermenters and the farmers will process the cherries, and that involves putting them into a big freshwater tanks, and all the coffee that floats to the top is kind of dead, so they skim that off. They keep that for like the 7-Eleven lattes or something like that. And then after that process, they depulp the fruit from the seed, so it goes through a machine like these big diesel powered, almost like a grinder, and it kind of like they dial it in, the water pressure and the spinning implement strips the fruit off the outside of the seed, and then you can dial in how much fruit you get off, but you want to get most of the fruit off if you're having a washed coffee. So there's that process, and then they go into water tanks again, and the water tanks, it's like a controlled fermentation, maybe 12, 18, 24, 36 hours, 72 hours, and the coffee's kind of germinating, thinking that it's going to spring to life. Amino acids combine. It's a fermentation process. It's monitored. They check the tanks with Brixometers, like checking for the alcohol and sugar level and that kind of thing, seeing where the fermentation's at. So that's like an expert job. Then once that is done, they go through like big channels where they wash the coffee. So they kind of push the coffee through these big water channels and wash all that fermentation water off. And then they take the seeds and put them on either patios or raised drying beds or into machine dryers. So machine dryers are expensive. So most farmers are raised beds or patios, and the seeds are tended there. So they're turned in the sunlight. They're dried for probably like 10 to 21 days anyway, in that range. So there's people tending them the whole time, turning them over. If the rain starts, they'll cover them up. It's like really kind of intensive process. After that, the coffee's dried down to 10 or 12% moisture levels. That's kind of an expert job as well. Then they'll be bagged up in what's called their parchment. They've got like a little cover on them at that stage. Then after that, they'll go to a dry mill for further processing. So they take that parchment off, and then they'll even put the coffee on like conveyor belts where they're hand sorted, so people pick out defects. Or they might go through, in some more developed companies, like a light color sorter. So it like looks at all the color of the beans and like sorts out the really yellow ones or the really brown ones or whatever, and you get all the nice kind of green colored coffee that you're after. It's another process, and then they get packed into like Grain Pro bags, which is like a really impervious sealed bag, so there's no water going in or out of the coffee. It's really stable. And then they're kind of shopped to market. So whatever country or whoever's producing that coffee will send it to exporters, send samples overseas to try and find a buyer for it. And that process of cupping and scoring and roasting and deciding on how much the coffee's worth, all that's a whole industry of importing, exporting. And then the logistics come into it. So you get packed in containers, onto container ships to from the country of origin to where they're being sold and roasted. And then they'll go to a roasting facility like this, and we'll sample roast them, design a profile, cup them, try and roast the best out of the coffee. And then the final step of the journey is to go into a cafe where they put in like really expensive, precision engineered barista equipment, grinders and coffee machines. And so that's a whole industry behind it. All that equipment and the whole industry, the service industry, the hospitality industry. Coffee is a huge part of it. So many things. And yeah, it's just when you actually think about even just the journey of the coffee, let alone the milk that goes, it's probably 80 or 90% of your beverage, which has probably come from a really good dairy, where expert dairy farmers, well-raised cows, processed milk, homogenized, pasteurized, stored cold, delivered to your cafe, steamed by your barista to perfection, and then like combined with that coffee that's come from the other side of the world. And just to think of that process, maybe in comparison to, say, a glass of wine that likely the grapes are grown in Australia, they're juiced, they're fermented, filtered and fine, they go into a bottle and they're poured. They're not, the hospitality, side of pouring a bottle of wine is you open the cork and you pour it out. Like, it's not dialing in, getting the exact right extraction, steaming milk, all the things that an expert barista is really good at. Anyone can pop open a cork or twist a bottle open and pour it. So I think the whole emphasis is just to think about all the people that have contributed to that journey, and then the end price is, for it to be $5 is just kind of preposterous. Going out for a coffee with friends is still probably the cheapest thing you can do. Going and meeting someone for a coffee is, so valuable to so many people and so many jobs. It's a good thing to do.